Hello and welcome to today's video. My name's Haley and today is part 2 of 2, continuing within this shadow of obscurity within the 11th gene key. In the last video, we left off discussing the brain, the different hemispheres and what they mean, how connection between hemispheres allows connection between the heart and brain, and it's this brain-heart coherence that allows an individual to tap into their own supernatural capacities, those of which are unknown and infinite. So continuing on, and just to remind you guys, the name of this shadow state chapter, shadow frequency chapter, is Obscurity, the Fascist Regime of the Human Ego. Quite the title. In this next line that I'm about to read you, he starts to tie in this very blaring title and bring some meaning to it. He says, in the center of this virtual world sits the separate self, a controlled illusion held together by a fascist inner regime, operating through an inner media that continuously manipulates you through the medium of light and sound. So basically what he's trying to say here is that, once again, if you are engaging in the interference pattern, which I gave you an example of that in the last video, you're allowing the mind to interfere with the nature of reality, pull you out of here and into here, pull you out of here and into here. You're cutting this connection of brain-heart coherence. The hemispheres are divided. When this happens, you only see and you only hear what you think you see and what you think you hear. So you start to actually not observe reality as it is. Instead, you are so stuck in here that you start to project a reality that is an illusion, that does not actually exist, that only exists for you. And this can be dangerous because it's dependent upon whatever energy is creating this image. And whether it's a good thought or a bad thought that you're projecting onto reality, you're still projecting onto reality. You're still not seeing things as they are. You're still, to a certain degree, rejecting what is. Oh no, I'd rather not look at all this. I'd rather create a movie and play it and then live in that. So this fascist inner regime is the ego, is the separate self, is the space between you and reality, the gap between fear and love. He notes that this ego, this projection upon reality, this illusion of separation can dissolve, can die, can cease so that oneness is restored. So, how do we do that, Richard Rod? How does one do that? Become less ego and more love. Living less in the mind and more in connection of the brain and the heart. Less in just the left hemisphere and rather connecting and integrating both hemispheres in order to not only unlock those supernatural capacities, but also to live in the supernatural. He says all you have to do is essentially transcend this great human fear, which is repressed in the right hemisphere of the brain. Simply tap into the right brain, the part in which is not usually used. Once again, the right brain is the part that is chaotic, illogical, idealistic, knows how to dream, be creative. the left brain, this more masculine energy, this logical practicality, doing, you know, how the world is run today is mostly with this left brain. We have to use both. See the equanimity in both. This connection causes this connection. And so he then spits out a few ways in order to tap into that repressed right brain. He says you could go to a shamanic training. You could master a mystical technique, which could be prayer, meditation, songs, poem, channeling. A mystical technique could be Kriya or a certain traditional lineage of yoga, breath work. He says you could do some drugs to tap into this right brain, therapy or art. And there's many more ways to do so. This is just what he's listed and what I've brainstormed on top of that. Also, just a little quick PSA, I'm not telling you to do drugs right now. These are just things that do unlock the right brain. Just want to say that. And he says heed with caution because you may start to feel overwhelmed. This overwhelm can lead to delusion. I'm sure we all know the person that has had a bad trip, taking too many shrooms or too much acid, or maybe you who's watching this has had a bad trip before. And essentially the reasoning behind this, ironically enough, using the left brain to describe why the right brain sometimes overwhelms, is because the right brain, for the most part, once again, is repressed in most individuals and collectively as a consciousness. And so if you open this floodgate too fast, you take too many drugs, you tap into too many parts of the right brain, you do too much breath work, I've done that before, you do too many shamanic trainings, I don't know. You essentially open this right brain wide open, and it's been repressed for how long? You don't know how long. Okay, not only your whole lifetime, but perhaps lifetimes. So there's an overwhelm when you go from 0 to 1,000. And this overwhelm releases a lot of energy, you could say, a lot of creative life force, a lot of talents that want to be tapped into, a lot of spiritual gifts, a lot of information that wants to be integrated and grounded into this now moment. But there's a backup all of a sudden. I can't process all of this. You know how you, if you've ever done shrooms, you've probably, or any spiritual medicine, plant medicine, you've probably heard of this term called integration, which implies the work that an individual needs to do post-retreat, post-trip, in order to properly realize what they learned, come back to a place of feeling here, not super high in the sky. And when you, once again, when you open this floodgate and you do too much therapy, too much art, too much mystical techniques, too much shamanic training, too much prayer, too much channel, too much poems, too much song, whatever it is, you have a lot to process. The overwhelm creates delusion. You feel like you're losing your mind because you are. You are losing your mind to a certain degree. I would know this, by the way, because for you who's watching this, I had a 6-month period in my life where I was, for the most part, like borderline psycho. I would break out into these bizarre symptoms of just like hysterical laughing and crying and sweating, hot and cold flashes. I would feel like electricity was running through my body. Like, I could go on. I'm going to sound crazy, but this is actually what happened. And I lived in New York City at the time. It was absolutely horrific. So overwhelmed. And this happened because I did way too much breath work that supposedly and definitely, I can attest to, releases DMT naturally into the brain. So translating this into 3D terms, I essentially tapped too much into the right brain, and now I had a lot to integrate, and I felt very overwhelmed, and that manifested through the body as delusion. And the reason I believe this happened, the reason I believe delusion ever happens, is because, as you know, if you've ever felt a bit delusional, you kind of feel so crazy or so off or so weird that you're like, I just need to do nothing. Or not even I need to do nothing. I literally can't do anything. I can't even go to the grocery store like a normal person because I feel nuts. And so I do think delusion drives a person to rest, which is ultimately what the body needs to integrate. Integration can be done through the worksheets and the logic and the talking and the therapy. But I do think a lot of integration has to do with resting and allowing the body to get used to this new connection, this new energy that's been unleashed, this new room in the body. So yes, heed with caution when thinking about tapping into this right brain, but also don't be afraid of it. Because as you start to integrate, and once again, the slower you tap in and you move at a steady speed, integration doesn't seem so overwhelming. You also start to connect these hemispheres, which connects the brain and the heart, which allows the individual once again to unlock the spiritual gifts and talents already latent within them. So yeah, it's very simple. Don't be afraid of tapping into the right brain. Also, don't be a double Capricorn like me and go nuts. Everything in moderation. Oh, we're almost in Libra season actually, so everything in balance. I was just with my friend who's super into astrology, so maybe that's why I'm like, I never throw astrology terms at people usually, but yeah, she's super into astrology. I was just with her. Okay, moving on. He says here that every single element or image that floods from this unconscious, from this right brain, represents an archetype, meaning it means something. There's symbolism. And I'll just emphasize here that just because something means something doesn't mean you have to figure it out with your analysis. Understanding there's meaning and also understanding that you may never know what that meaning is crucial. And archetypes are everywhere, right? They're seen within the media, within storybooks. The Alchemist is a great example of an archetype hero's journey. They're everywhere because they're projections of our own psyche, he says. And then this is a funny thing he says here to me. He says, the more you try to avoid them, archetypes, the more you try to avoid archetypes, the more they stalk you. The more you try to avoid meaning, symbolism, the more meaning and symbolism try to come after you, to make you aware. The more you reject consciousness and presence, the more it will come off after you. Consciousness wants to be observed because you are consciousness. It is you. I don't know if any of that made sense, but that's what Richard Rudd says. He says, the more you try to avoid them, the more they stalk you. And I think that's what he's saying. I would love for whoever's watching this to take another whack at that. The more you try to avoid archetypes, the more they stalk you. What do you think that means? I'd be curious to know. Oof, okay. If you could just begin to trust the images that come to you in your dreams. And this is interesting because the first time I read this chapter, I had just made a video that morning about a dream I had that was very significant that I'll link in the description box. I posted on my Instagram. I don't know why I did that. I just felt like it. felt like sharing. And then I read this line, if you could just begin to trust the images that come to you in your dreams. And I thought, oh, wow. So it really was as profound as a dream as I thought it was. And once again, dreams is the ability to start to tap into the subconscious, allow this symbolism and archetypal memory to surface. And they want to be paid attention to. Your dreams, symbolism, meaning. It wants to be made aware of. There's actually a quote within the book, The Alchemist, that I mentioned earlier. And it says, dreams are the language of God. And here's a crazy story. This is actually a crazy story. A few years back, maybe, I want to say like 2.5 years ago, maybe, I'm laying in my auntie's bed in Hawaii, having like a little lay down meditation that kind of turned into a nap. And I remember I kind of woke up in this trance. So my eyes were open, I got out of bed, and something was like moving me. Like obviously it was me, but I was like half asleep, half awake, kind of like sleepwalking. I walk over to this bookshelf, I open the cabinet, and I just grabbed the book out and I opened the page. And then I like actually woke up and I was like, what the hell? Kid you not, have The Alchemist in my hands, it's open. And the first thing I see is dreams are the language of God. I was like, well, that's weird. I should probably read this book again, because I'd read it before when I was in, gosh, I think like high school or middle school. So I reread The Alchemist, and that's a great book. If you've never read it, it's such a sweet little tale. Perfect fusion of fiction and spiritual knowledge, well written, and so many truth bombs in there. Dreams are the language of God being one of many, many, many truths in that book. So yes, I believe this. Dreams are the language of consciousness, of awareness, of evolution. If you could just begin to trust the images that come to you in your dreams. So this isn't a contemplation, this is more like a little game. See if tonight before you go to bed, you can really set the intention. I would like to remember my dream. Go to bed, and as you wake up in the morning, something I personally do is I have a recorder. I will record my dreams. The moment I wake up, hit the start button. You can do this on your phone too, on your little voice memo app. Hit that start button and just start talking as you're half asleep, what you remember from the dream. Later on in that day, re-listen to what you said. You will be so surprised how much you remember when you wake up half asleep as you spit into the recorder. It's wild. And talk about paying attention to dreams and trying to extract archetype, meaning symbolism. So, so helpful. I actually feel paying attention to your own dreams is a form of therapy. Okay, my phone just died. We're back. And the last thing he says here before he gets into the repressive and the reactive natures of the shadow of obscurity is, when you finally make this courageous leap, courageous inner leap, the dream that has been hidden inside of you, the spiritual gifts, for so long, shake you awake into presence, into reality, and introduce you to a new and boundless horizon. So many more opportunities and synchronicities that were always there now start to become rather obvious to you, because once again, instead of living in this projection that you created, you're actually seeing things as they are. By tapping into this right brain, using any of those techniques, modalities, or anything else you can brainstorm, the brain-heart coherence, the hemisphere connection starts to allow a great deal of evolution to take place. Okay, so the repressive nature is fantasizing. fantasy is a genre in the books, in the movies. There's sexual fantasies, there's daydreams, there's visions of the future, there's the helpless romantics. There's so many different ways to fantasize. And he says here that there's nothing wrong with fantasy. It's natural. The mind does that. So long as it finds a healthy and creative outlet. So, once again, the nature of this right hemisphere is to fantasize, is to be chaotic and unpredictable and idealistic, dreamy. And there's nothing wrong with that, with this femininity. It's only wrong when we start to repress it, because we either don't understand it, in which case it scares us and we want to shove it back down, or maybe we do understand it and we feel shame around it. The most obvious example of this being if you have a sexual fantasy and you feel shame around that, and you say, oh, I wish I didn't think that, and you shove it back down. Well, guess what? It still happened, and now you're just rejecting what happened, which can only lead to kind of a downward spiral. These fantasies, these dreams, these ideals need to find a healthy and creative outlet. They need to feel accepted. And again, this is not to say you should act on every fantasy you have, obviously. Sometimes the fantasies, the projections into the future, are harmful or dangerous to yourself or others. So definitely don't act on those in the 3D. But you can still find a way to channel the energy. A simple example being, let's just paint a very basic scenario. Say there is a sexual fantasy that cannot be enacted in the 3D because it's not appropriate. It's going to harm either yourself or another person, but you don't know what to do with this. You understand now that repressing it is actually not ideal. It's not helpful. It's still in you. You want to allow this energy to move. You could paint a piece of art and pour into that art how you feel about this thing. Or you could discharge it in another way. Go move your body. Go box it out. Move some energy. There are healthy and creative ways to allow the fantasy to pass through. And in the case where, let's say you have a daydream and it's something beautiful, like, oh, I have this vision that one day I'll be in a coffee shop and then I'll look this way and we'll make eye contact and it'll be the love of my life. And then we have a picnic, and at the picnic there's all my favorite types of fruit and he feeds me grapes like this. Whatever, I don't know, I'm just making something up. I mean, if you really want to go act that out in real life, that's not necessarily harmful directly to yourself or another person. Having a guy you find cute in a coffee shop feed you grapes in the park. So some things can be acted out and manifested through the 3D, or they can be dealt with and cradled in a more artful way. I gave you the example of quite literally painting or going and doing boxing. The point is, you do not want to deny this fantasy or dream that's coming up, and you don't want to call it wrong or reject it. Because when you reject it, all you do is push it back down into your subconscious. And guess what? Every movement you take from there on out is now having this subconscious energy in the back burner of your mind, moving you throughout the world. And you definitely don't want that in there, especially if it's a harmful thought or fantasy. Instead, you want to see it, accept it, and liberate it in a way that is constructive. And he also notes here that, some people have great dreams of like, oh, when I grow up, I'm going to be a firefighter, or I'm going to go to the moon, or, think about all these things kids say, when I grow up, or one day I want to do that, or I want to dress like that. And if these dreams never get acted on, either literally manifested in the 3D or discharged through another creative outlet, they become unlived lives, he says. And this creates a gradual drain on the physical energy of the body, leading to health problems. These are desires that aren't being acted on. And desires are made to be either acted on, if healthy, once again, or desires are there to fuel you and move you into a form of creation. These inner fantasies that don't find a creative outlet block us from following our true destiny. Because when we shove them back down, once again, now they're affecting every single movement we make. They're draining our energy in every single movement we make. The destiny is hidden behind the fantasies. Your purpose, your path, your passions. This is why paying attention to the dreams is so important, because so much of what you're meant to do while you're here on earth is embedded within those dreams, the language of God. And the longer we shove them down, put them back into the darkness, back into the shadow, back into the subconscious, the more twisted they become. And this actually is where you start to get those crazy fantasies that you hear about people acting on in the 3D, that you're like, what? Are they psycho? To a certain degree, yes. If you start to keep rejecting what's trying to come up, you are going to feel insane and perhaps act insane. And that is dangerous for you and everyone else. So it's actually in an individual's best interest to become aware of the fantasy or the dream and find a way to act on it. Fuel it. Have it fuel you into creating something. Release this creative power that wants to channel out of you. Don't be afraid of it. And on the flip side, the reactive nature of obscurity, of not seeing things clearly, is deluded. Delusional. Sorry, I made a note here of someone I think is delusional. Not going to read that out loud. This is for my own purpose of trying to understand this chapter. I don't think it's nice to call people delusional, of course. But it is funny. Okay, so how does a person become deluded? I mean, and I gave you guys the example. I even called myself delusional, which was true. I had a big phase where I was very delusional. How did I become deluded? Well, as I explained earlier, I invited too much natural DMT into my brain through breath work. So yeah, you can become delusional through enacting, the right brain, having that floodgate open and overwhelm you. The deluded person turns the inner fantasy into a projection field and tries to manifest it in the world. Reactive natures use the outer world to hide from what lies within them. So if you're reacting, if you're deluded, you think of the person that's deluded, they're constantly avoiding in here. They're constantly overstimulating themselves with stress, people, places, things to do. Oh, there's always something to do. They're a little frenetic. And gosh, it gives someone anxiety to be around someone who's deluded. They're acting like a loony. The person that's deluded doesn't know how to feel their feelings and also perhaps maybe doesn't even want to feel their feelings. When in reality, this is the only way to connect the hemispheres, to really properly integrate this right brain, is to feel all that's coming out, is to see the meaning and the symbolism and archetype for what it is to be okay if it doesn't make sense. And the deluded person is like, no. No, if I can't understand what's coming out, then I don't want anything to do with it. And again, this might even be a subconscious pushing down. But it's an avoiding of integration, essentially, that causes the person to become delusional. That's what it was for me. I was avoiding integrating all that I had called up, still engaging in my bad habits, still running around like a chicken with my head cut off in New York, still trying to do a career I wasn't happy in, because I was acting delusional. I didn't want to process everything that had come up because I knew it was going to require change, and change is uncomfortable. Again, this is me looking back now. In the moment, I was not aware of all this. And this is, I think, something really important to note is the person in your life that you know that you're like, yeah, they're delusional. They probably don't know that they're delusional, because this is an unconscious state, right? We're talking about a shadow frequency. A shadow, meaning it's in the unconscious. More likely than not, the person you know in your life is not trying to be crazy. Okay? And I think that's really important, because I know I wasn't trying to act crazy. And yeah, I look back on that version of me and I'm like, oh, babe. So I think having compassion for those people is really important. And again, compassion, just to reiterate, is I understand why you're acting the way you're acting, but that doesn't mean that I agree. So it's not that you are enabling their delusional behavior and tolerating it and allowing them to walk all over you or wreak havoc. No, it's not that. It's seeing things for what they are and still choosing to send them love instead of judgment. Because there's a great depth of denial in the one that is delusional. A denial of reality, a denial of what's coming in, a denial of what needs to change. And this is out of fear for the most part. And this person is headed for eventual disappointment and even breakdown. Oh yeah. Oh, okay, and then this is such a great definition. He says, delusion is the attempted externalization of a false dream that conceals a deeper and real dream. So I'm going to give you guys an example of that since it's a bit flowery. Delusion is an attempted externalization. The delusional person is trying to manifest in the 3D that they live in this dream that they have. Little do they understand that this dream that they have is actually not from here. It's from the left brain. It's from the logic. It's from the subconscious programming in society. It's not a dream that's service-oriented. It's not a dream that actually even serves the individual. It's a dream that serves the ego and the ego alone. It's a false dream. It's a dream from the false self. And so the person that's delusional is trying with all of their power, all of their energy to manifest this egoic dream. And it's because they're sending all of their energy there that they have no energy to manifest or even realize their real dreams that live in their heart. And again, a real dream being in congruence with service orientation. What can actually serve the whole? Once again, the whole includes myself. What's good for everyone? Because, in reality, this egoic dream, it's actually not good for anyone. It's not good for them and it's not good for me. And, when I was going through my little delusional phase, the dream I was trying to force into reality was becoming a supermodel. Oh man. And if you ask any of my old friends, they will affirm this. I used to go around saying, my name's Haley Steiner and I'm going to be a supermodel. Okay, now I think about that. Why did I want that dream? Well, first of all, I adopted it from my, at the time, agent. So it wasn't actually even mine. I didn't get it from here. I got it from someone else. And I wanted it because my ego, my separate self, my false identity, thought that externalizing this dream would give me success, would give me money, would give me happiness, would give me admiration, would make me feel safe and loved. When in reality, of course, becoming a supermodel cannot give me any of those things. In reality, and I found as I moved through this stage, my real dream, the one that's in here, is service-oriented. And actually now that's why I mentor girls that are, you know, moving through some of the things that I moved through in the modeling industry. So there's a little pitch about that at the end of this video if you haven't already seen that. But yeah, the real dream is after the delusion. So that's an example of that for you guys. That concludes this chapter. I think this video is a bit longer than I usually make them. So, yep, I'll see you in the next one. Getting into the gift of idealism. Hey guys, thanks again for tuning in with me for this Gene Keys episode. I also just wanted to come on here and start promoting my one-to-one coaching that I offer to women and girls ages 16 to 35. If you've followed me on Instagram for a while, you might be a little bit familiar with my story. I was a model in New York City for 5 years, and in that time frame, I did quite some damage. I developed a really severe eating disorder, body dysmorphia, chronic anxiety. Oh my gosh, I couldn't even go out to dinner without thinking about how much calories, how much I'd have to overwork out in order to compensate for what I was eating. All of those issues led to quite a depression and turned into PCOS, and I also lost my menstrual cycle for over 5 years. All of this amalgamation of issues led me to soon realize that something needed to change. I went through much work. Many people helped me to get to where I am now, and I'm so thrilled to say I'm living such a more abundant life, and I don't feel zapped and drained and fear of judgment anymore like I used to. I would love to offer what I've learned through my own embodied experience, the meditative techniques that have gravitated toward me, and the own verified games that I've made up and curated to help you walk home to more of you and who you really are, so that all of these things can stop draining your energy. You know, all the constant comparison to others and to people on Instagram, all the over-analysis about working out and what you're eating or what you look like. All of these things are not what life's about, as cheesy as it sounds. And I would love to help you come into more unity with you if you struggle with any of these things and you're a woman or girl between the ages of 16 and 35. So feel free to reach out to me if one-on-one coaching sounds resonant. You can feel free to DM me through Instagram or contact me via email, both of which will be left below in the description box. So much love and aloha to you guys, and I'll see you all in the next video.